just jump to the next panel because I am aware that the previous one just finished. So I am gonna give a couple of minutes to rest and to a drink or the another things you want to do. We have 6 more minutes to start our panel, and I see that the Dr. Sharifullah Dorani is already here. So I will give you a couple of minutes more, and then we are gonna start. Thank you very much.
Professor Rahman, how are you?
Thank you very much, Sharifullah Dorani, but you keep in mind that everyone can hear us.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Great to see you. How's it going? How was the conference today? Did it go well?
Yeah, I think so. I mostly listen and they organize the panels and they check the mood conferences and the voices, but it's good for us. I hope that all the audiences and participants feel the same way.
Let's hope so. I'm sure they will.
How are you, your family?
Everybody's okay, and thank you very much. Yes, it's been a really busy time because we moved from our parents' house because of coronavirus to this new house. So all this time, basically for the last 3-4 weeks, painting and decorating and all that. So it's really busy.
So it's good for you because the next wave is gonna be bigger than the first one, I think. So it's better to have a safe house before the winter is coming. It sounds like the good Game of Thrones, but it's not about Game of Thrones. Really, winter is coming, and you have to be much more careful before.
Yes, inshallah. Yeah, well, and so yeah, it's been a very busy time, and but apart from that, everything is okay.
Yeah, I was infected a couple of, not we actually 10 days ago. I am fine now. I took my medicine. It has
Oh,
been
really?
now the 8th day. My wife and myself was infected.
By what
Uh,
was it?
what the virus, the
Corona?
coronavirus. Yeah, yeah.
Really? Oh, that's good that you're feeling well
But
now.
yeah, I feel well. I didn't just lie down the bed. I was on foot every time. I think within a week I am gonna have another test. If it's negative, then I will be better.
Inshallah, you'll be fine. It's just, it's the first few couple of weeks. As soon as you pass those 2 weeks, you'll be inshallah all right.
Yeah, inshallah.
All right. Oh, that's
So we have 15 participants, 1 minute left.
okay. 15
Okay.
participants. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope people will come. Okay,
Yeah.
it's better we start because the timing is everything for the conferences.
Not a problem. Not a problem. You go.
If you don't want, I would like to give a couple of information about the book session
Okay.
discussion because
Yeah.
we can't see often a book discussion in a conferences. It has been the seventh one. We are organizing these conferences at CESRAN International with the cooperation of ULA.
Yeah.
Book discussions are actually one of the key activities we are doing in the conference because we invited the authors and we can discuss the subject more deeply than other presentation because most of the presenters, they are just focusing on their paper and it was a part of the subject mostly. But if it's a book, it tries to cover most of the aspects of the issue or the subject of the book.
Absolutely.
So we have now a book and its author, and the book called America in Afghanistan, Foreign Policy and Decision Making from Bush to Obama to Trump, written by Dr. Sharifullah Dorani. It was published in last year in 2019. I think the book is as a result of an extensive and the time-consuming project because it seems that it requires much more interviews,
Absolutely. Yeah.
traveling and getting deep of the subject. So I have read the book twice. Once I wrote a book review for it, and before the conferences, I have read it again, and I can assure all the audiences that it is really good book. I strongly suggest
Thank
it.
you.
But it doesn't matter what I am saying. We have the author here, and we are gonna have a summary of the book within 30 minutes, at most 45 minutes. It's better to have it much more time for question and
I think so.
answers.
I will stick to half an hour.
Before giving the floor, that I think I'm gonna, it's better to have some information about you as well, just not focusing on the book. Sharifullah Dorani completed his PhD on US anti-terrorism law in Afghanistan and the Greater Middle East at Durham University. His master's degrees and undergraduate degrees from the UCL from London and University of Northampton in law. I have just realized that you are going to have a novel to publish within this year.
It should have been this year, but it's the editing stage is taking a bit longer. So hopefully, inshallah, next year, beginning of the year, next year or middle of the year.
I hope that I'm going to be the first one to congratulate you about that one.
Thank you.
And he is also acting as an area expert and the area editor in CESRAN International, in specifically Political Reflection magazine. You will have all the contact information in our website in Political Reflection magazine. If you want to contact him after this book session, because we are not going to have enough time to discuss all the issues, you can directly write him, and I am sure that he will write it back to you about questions. Okay, I think we are ready to go, and if you don't have any previous questions before we start, then the floor is yours, and go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rahman. It's really an honor to be invited to CESRAN International and to this great conference to basically talk about my book. Yes, this book is as a result of my PhD, which I started in 2010, and then it took me, including the PhD and the book, about 10 years. So it took a lot of travelings to Afghanistan, interviewing people from all walks of life, people who work in the government, ordinary people. And the main focus of this book is actually on the voices of the main, the voices of the main ordinary people, basically in Afghanistan, because we had books on Afghanistan by other authors, particularly by Western authors, and they were not taking into consideration the Afghan voices, the realities on the ground, as much as I would have liked them to. So that's what I did, and I completed my PhD in 2015, and then it took me another 3 years to do some more work, actually 3.5 years more, to basically turn it into a book and do some more research, and wrote some 5 more chapters on the book altogether. So the book is basically, as you said, it's called America in Afghanistan, Foreign Policy and Decision Making from Bush to Obama to Trump. And what it does is that it focuses on 6 main questions. Those questions were the questions I always heard from the ordinary Afghans when I was researching in Afghanistan. And actually, those are the questions that I heard from many Western Westerners as well. And this is the question that I try to answer. First, what were US motives in Afghanistan, or intentions in Afghanistan? Second, if they were to establish a secure and peaceful Afghanistan, why did it fail? Third question is, if ineffective governance was to blame for the failure, as most US politicians told the Afghans, why did the US support policies that visibly bolstered bad governance and pushed Afghanistan towards instability? The fourth question, if Pakistan's army's support for the insurgency, that is for the Taliban and the Haqqani group and other insurgent groups, was to blame for the failure, if the Pakistani army support for the insurgency was to blame for the failure, as most US politicians gave it as an excuse, why did the US, with all its extraordinary capabilities, not decisively deal with Pakistan's state-sponsored terrorism? That's the fourth question. The fifth question, if Afghanistan's inherent characteristics, which I will explain what they are, were to blame for the failures, as many US foreign policy makers implied, why was there peace and security during the 40 years era of King Zahir Shah, which was between 1933 and 1973, that 4 decades in Afghanistan was really, really peaceful? And the sixth question is, why did bewildering, confusing changes took place in America's foreign policy over the course of 17 years, which the book covers up to 2019. So, as I said, the inborn Afghan characteristics or complicities or differences, whatever you call them, they were relied on by President Bush, by President Obama, and by President Trump, and many, many other policymakers to say, we cannot stabilize Afghanistan because of those inborn characteristics. And what are they? They usually talk about Afghanistan suffering deeply from decades of civil war, religious extremism, drug mafia, neighboring interference. For example, Pakistan in particular, with which Afghanistan shares 2,500 miles of border, poverty, unemployment, lack of education, and the presence of different ethnic, linguistic, sectarian, tribal, political groups who had been, that's core, who had not been getting on with each other for centuries. And plus, President Obama also relied invoked some other inborn characteristics, like saying the Afghan government was ineffective, the Afghan National Security Forces were insufficient, and also Obama always argued that the Taliban was basically an insurgency which was from indigenous people or the largest ethnic group, which is Pashtun, and hence it will be very difficult for America to win this war. And these inborn characteristics, in many policymakers' opinion, were a major source of conflict, or what they call it, civil war. And the confusing changes that took place during the 20 years of the US foreign policy towards Afghanistan, it was a number of them. So I'll just mention a number of them. Evolving from a policy of abandonment prior to the 9/11 terrorist acts to a military intervention after 9/11, from a counter-terrorism to a counter-insurgency strategy, from rooting out terrorism to containing it, from treating the Taliban as terrorists and consequently the enemy to declare them as non-terrorists and thus not enemy, as we see now they are talking with the Taliban, from the goal of defeating the Taliban to degrading them, from seeing Afghanistan as having compelling relevance to US national security interest to seeing it now as having minimal importance, and from intending to spend as long as it took to secure a democratic and strong Afghanistan to the objective of establishing a good enough state so that the US could have a quick exit. So these were the 6 questions and also the other details that I explain about the 6 decisions. So to answer those 6 decisions, what I did was basically to I picked up 6 important decisions throughout from President Bush to President Trump. Those 6 decisions explain the turning point in American foreign policy. And these are as following, those 6 decisions that my book focuses on. Following the 9/11 terrorist atrocities, the first decision in late 2001 produced the resulting global war on terror policy. So I focus on this, with its first stop or intervention being Afghanistan. If you remember, the global war on terror policy was not specifically made for Afghanistan. The policy was such that, as Secretary of State Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, argued, Afghanistan was the first stop. So the intention was go to Afghanistan, get rid of the terrorist groups, establish a government there, go to Iraq, get rid of Saddam Hussein, establish a government there, go to Iran, get rid of the regime, establish a government there, and then go to other groups that they deemed to be supporting either was terrorists or supporting terrorists, or harboring, as they were using the language was then. So this is the first question. The second question is basically a year later, the Bush administration made the decision of counter-terrorism. So after once they went in late 2001, they invaded Afghanistan, and then in 2002, they made that decision to basically employ a counter-terrorism strategy. And again, I focus on this quite in details. I'll come back to that later on anyway. And the third turning point is when Barack Obama came into power. So when he came into power, he made the famous search decision, which was, the review was called the AFPAC review. So that focused on that decision. And the fourth turning point is when Obama decided to withdraw its troops and to end the US involvement in Afghanistan by the end of his office. Practically just leave 1,000 US troops in the Afghan embassy, American embassy in Afghanistan in Kabul. And then the other 2 decisions that I focus on, and actually I call this withdrawal decision. But then again, and then there are two other decisions, which one decision was by, one chapter is focused on Donald Trump and his views and his cabinet when initially he came into power. And the second chapter is basically focused on Donald Trump's South Asia's policy, which covered Afghanistan. So, and for each of these decisions, I focus on the process of decision making. I divide each decision into 4 phases: the initiation, the formulation, the implementation, and the evaluation phases. And I basically, in the formulation phase, I focus what factors influenced, for example, George W. Bush and his cabinet to make the decision of global war on terror and invaded Afghanistan. What were the factors? The factors were, some of them were, the most important one was the 9/11 terrorist acts, which unfortunately killed many innocent people. And hence, and there are other factors. For example, George W. Bush saw terrorism as evil, and his religious views also played a part. Public opinion played an important part. The presence of neoconservative in his cabinet who saw, again, terrorism really in a really, they wanted to deal with terrorism effectively. They were criticizing previously the Clinton administration for not acting decisively when there were attacks on American bases in certain parts of the world. And as I go from the initiation phase, then I go to the formulation phase of how this policy was basically formulated. Again, I talk about it in detail. Unfortunately, it took them some 10 days or even less than that to make the policy of war on terror. But the policy was not, they were not arguing, they had very limited knowledge of Afghanistan. They were basically arguing how to make the policy, and they were thinking that their assumptions behind those policies will always be met. Those assumptions were correct. And this is what my book argues, that the policies that that the assumptions those policies were based on were inaccurate. They were far away from Afghanistan, from the realities of the region, and hence those policies kept failing. And then for the formulation, as explained, and then for the implementation part of the policy, I go to Afghanistan. The book goes to Afghanistan and sees how the war on terror policy and the counterterrorism policy was implemented in Afghanistan. What were the shortcomings of those policies? Why those policies failed? And in certain cases, why those policies succeeded. And again, this is again I do with President Obama, with his decision making, why he made the search decision, what was the factors that influenced it, and then I talk about the war cabinet of the Barack Obama, and I talk about all the war cabinets of the 3 administrations, who it consists of, what views did they have, whether their views really impacted the policy, which I come to a conclusion that it did. And then by 2010, we see the different points of view between the policymakers. I call it the Biden group, which there were certain member of the Barack Obama's administration that they were in the Biden group who were supporting Biden's views regarding Afghanistan. And there were other group, which I call it the Petraeus, General David Petraeus group, that there were certain members who were basically supporting Petraeus views, and Obama let them argue, both sides let them let both sides to argue their point of views, and then eventually came to a conclusion that he should basically, this is the important point, Obama agreed with the views expressed by Biden, but because of the pressure put on him by the military as well as the public opinion, he decided to basically compromise and not to give General Petraeus the 40,000 troops that he wanted, but give him 30,000, and also put a limit on the time that they could stay in Afghanistan. And from the day one, when he sent those troops deep down, as my book assumes Obama was of the belief that the strategy is not going to be successful because of the reasons that Biden argued, and those reasons were really some of them are really interesting. For example, Biden argued, he told Obama that the real problem is not Afghanistan. No matter how many troops you send to Afghanistan, the problem is that there are insurgent bases in Pakistan, supported by the military establishment of Pakistan. So no matter you send hundreds of thousands of troops to Afghanistan, those bases will remain untouched. And as long as they remain untouched, they will wait. As soon as you withdraw the troops, they will send back their people. So that was one of the reasons that Biden was saying. And the military was saying, no, once we send the troops, we will provide security. Once we provide security, people will come on our side, and those camps outside of Afghanistan will become ineffective by their own. We don't have to do anything because people will be on our side. That was the main focus of counterinsurgency strategy. But Biden was saying, no, we cannot win in Afghanistan. And Biden was focusing and relying on those inner complicities that I mentioned initially. So because of those issues, Afghanistan will never become peaceful. Let's just send not a lot of troops just to carry on counter-terrorism operations in Afghanistan, and that's all we need to do. And then, eventually Obama comes to a conclusion that this war is not winnable, so I have to withdraw all the troops, leave a good enough state, as long as the state is able to support itself and to support large population centers, and to fight with the Taliban, stop the Taliban, stop the Al-Qaeda and other network to attack America and its allies. That's good by me. And by the way, we leave some number of troops so that we could carry on our counterterrorism operations against Al-Qaeda and other groups. But by 2016, when Obama changed his policy because of what happened in the Middle East, because of the coming into power of ISIS or Daesh, and Obama was being criticized in America for not doing enough in Middle East and withdrawing troops quickly from Iraq without thinking about the consequences, and hence that happened. Trump famously kept criticizing him in the 2016 election. So Obama decided, no, we're going to leave some 8,000 troops in Afghanistan and leave it for what Trump does. Whoever the next president is, he will decide on the fate of the Afghan strategy and the troops. And then Trump comes into power. Trump was somebody President Trump, who was against the Afghanistan war initially, but in 2015, he somehow changed his view. He said, no, Afghanistan war is effective. It's important for the American national security. We have to establish, we have to be in Afghanistan. And he approved the Nicholson's proposal, and he sent some 4,000 troops to Afghanistan, made the South Asian policy, which he basically, one of the most important part of his policy was that he said to Pakistan, enough is enough. We know you've been fooling us. Effectively, that's what he said. You've been fooling us for the past 15 years. You're taking our money and then killing our own people. You have to stop that, or otherwise you will face the consequences. And there were optimism on the ground to say that actually President Trump would deal with the root causes of the war. But apart from placing Pakistan on the financial action task force, which is like financing it's a financing watch list, temporary, but it was now removed. Trump didn't do anything decisively. So as the Afghanistan war keeps going on, now we have the peace talks. which you know, there are a lot of obstacles before it, but there is also hope that there's going to be a peace settlement between the Taliban and the Afghan government, and hopefully we will have a peaceful Afghanistan. Although I am cautiously optimistic, but there are a lot of obstacles on the way, and that's what my book does. And I hope is that, do you want me to carry on, or is that enough for the book, Professor Rahman?
Whenever you want to stop and expect the questions, that's fine. It's up to you.
Apart from a few things that I would like to say is that in the conclusion, I make it clear in the book, when I met with the Afghans on the ground, I could say a great majority of them, no matter where they worked, those who worked in the government, even some of them worked in the high profile positions. And of course, they spoke to me on the conditions that I should not identify them, and I haven't. They believed somehow, and still believe, that belief is really, really, you know, it's like, as the policymakers, American policymakers like Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Secretary of Defense Gates, Bob Woodward's in his book, many of them in his book, they state that. George W. Bush states it in his book. They believe that there was some kind of conspiracy theory going on, that the Americans are friends with Pakistan secretly, and basically the war is, put it this way, the war is a drama directed by America with the assistance of certain regional powers, and it's basically one side, the hero is Karzai, the villain is the Taliban. They are fighting, and that basically that war is there for America to strategically justify its presence in Afghanistan. If there is no war, then America will have no pretext to stay. But my research showed that this is not the case. I do not think that America was dishonest or had bad intention towards Afghanistan. I think the the three administrations made a lot of mistakes, policy mistakes. And those policy mistakes were made due to two reasons. Reason one, those policies were cheap, hence they made them. They relied on the warlords in Afghanistan, on a powerful syndicate. I called them in my book the powerful syndicate, compromise of warlords, strongmen, criminals, mafia gangs, all that. They relied on them to provide security for the Americans, so they don't have to send their troops to Afghanistan. That was one of the reasons that those policies didn't work properly in Afghanistan. And the second thing that the Americans innocently believed that those policy assumptions were the right assumptions for them, the policymakers, because they were unaware of the inner conflicts. For example, George W. Bush thought that Musharraf would stick to his word and would support America's war in Afghanistan. He initially, when he was told that Pakistan was playing a double game, he couldn't believe it. He got even angry. He said, "How could you say that? Musharraf promised me that he would support me." And this is what he did. Pakistan, for the first couple of years, stayed quiet and allowed America to, once America got embroiled in Iraq, things were going bad for President Bush in America. He didn't have his approval as high as initially, and people were accusing him of lies, this and that, because of the war because of the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Hence, Pakistan began interfering more. Iran interfered, increased its interference. Russia, all these regional complicities that Bush and the policymakers wasn't thinking at the time. They thought once America goes somewhere, everything would be good. And it also came as part of as I said in my book, it's to do with arrogance as well. They thought we're not the Soviet Union. We are America. Once we're there, nobody can double cross us. So we're there, everybody would be obeying what we are saying. So those were mistakes that made by the three administrations, and hence the war is where we are now. And just one more thing as well, it's very important that I mentioned that. So yeah, I don't think this was there is any game going on in Afghanistan, not at least from NATO or America's perspective, in my opinion. I think there is game, because we have the regional, as we know, Professor Rahman, our region is really, really complex. We have the issue of Kashmir. We have the issue of between Iran and Saudi Arabia. We have issue between Russia and America. We have issues between India and China. And of course, those problems are all played on the ground in Afghanistan. That's very true. The war in Afghanistan, in a way, is the war between India and Pakistan, because one party is supporting, one country supporting one group, the other supporting the other group. Both are scared. Pakistan wants to have strategic depth in Afghanistan. India wants to have a friendly government in Kabul. It just doesn't work, and hence war starts. Russia is unhappy with the sanctions imposed on it by America. And it's not happy. America is not happy with Russia because of Georgia and some other issues that we know, interference in America's elections in 2016, and there are many other issues, the Middle Eastern issues. Again, Russia supports, as reportedly, the Taliban, so that to weaken America in Afghanistan. Iran is the same. So there is, in a way, there is a great game that is going on, but not as in, I would say, it's conspiracy theory. It's just that when the America gets out of Afghanistan, pulls out of Afghanistan, unfortunately, if we do not have a stable government, and if the peace settlement between the Taliban and the Afghan government is not guaranteed by international powers. By that I mean, if one party breaches a term of the agreement, they should be accordingly punished. If such scheme is not in place, we will see exactly the repeat of an agreement between the Soviet Union and the Mujahideen back in I think they called it the Geneva Accord. It took late 1980s, and that enabled the Soviet Union to withdraw from Afghanistan. And then what happened was, as soon as the Soviet Union left Afghanistan, the Mujahideen decided to take Kabul by force, disregarding, not paying attention to any terms of the agreement. It was nothing. And after that, Benin Siwan, which was the UN envoy, came, and he made another agreement. Again, that agreement was broken because there was nobody no international power to say, okay, if a term is breached, you'll be punished accordingly. So I fear this might happen again, because at the moment what's happening in America is that Afghanistan being played as a political point. So Trump tries to make a point of, I'm withdrawing my troops from Afghanistan, so people have promised you, now I'm withdrawing it, so give me some more votes. That is unfortunately what's happening without the realities in Afghanistan. I must also say make one last point. No person in Afghanistan, including me, even I have been in this country for more than 2 decades, and I am not supporting American presence in Afghanistan. No Afghan would do so, regardless of who he is. Ghani, Karzai, me, anybody. But we see the necessity of it. We are where we are. President Bush intervened in Afghanistan. Okay, there could have been other ways that he could have dealt with it, but he didn't. Anyway, we are where we are. So now it's important that the Americans withdraw responsibly, leave a stable government in Afghanistan, America has got plenty of power. I'm not talking about the military power. The military power is not the solution. It's got other soft powers that it could use. Those troublemakers in the region, and everybody knows who it is. Every American policymaker who served for 1 month in Afghanistan, they know who the troublemakers are in the region. Those troublemakers, of course, they all do. They all do. I mean, you don't have to have a PhD on Afghanistan. You just pick up an article from New York Times and you understand what's going on in that country. So they have to deal with those troublemakers.
Why don't you name them?
Well, the trouble, I kept naming them. They are the regional powers that interfere in Afghanistan's politics. Who are supporting the Taliban?
So, do you actually want the U.S. Keep all the regional powers in line to save Afghanistan?
No. What I'm trying to say is that the United States has spent a lot of money in Afghanistan. It's a lot of its troops lost lives. Their lives, sadly, hundreds of thousands of Afghans lost their lives as well. So why is this war going on in Afghanistan? Because of the troublemakers. And who are the troublemakers in the region? They are the Pakistan military establishment that they're supporting the Taliban. There are certain elements from, I'm not saying the entire military establishment of Pakistan, there are elements in them. There are people from Iran that they're supporting the war in Afghanistan. There are elements from Russia. There are elements from other countries. So they need to sit down and have a really proper talk with them. And then if not, they have to use other options. I mean, okay. I think this
doesn't it mean that you are saying that we have to a peace negotiation, including all the countries involving in Afghanistan, and they set a line and the rules and obey these rules? That means that the regional peace negotiation, not the Afghanistan negotiation, isn't it?
I think for the peace negotiation to work, ideally, and sadly, I must say, the issue in Afghanistan is not internal, it's external. So you see those powers here, those groups that are setting, the two Afghan groups from two sides. They are who supports the Afghan government? America, of course, yeah. And NATO. So their say is important. Who supports the Taliban?
I am not opposing you. I see that you internalize all the issues, and because you are part of that country, and I feel that in the same way, really. I feel that I am a part of Afghanistan, and I really share the same idea with you, but we have to analytically asking questions to make it intellectually more comprehensive. That's why I am asking those questions. Please don't misjudge me. That
no, absolutely, okay? No. It's no, absolutely not, absolutely not. Okay. No, you're asking important questions. I do understand. This is what I'm going to come to the main point now. The main point is this: that we have this peace settlement, which we all Afghans are hopeful for. We are very hopeful for that, and this is the only solution. War is not the solution. We shouldn't go into war. I'm not asking NATO or America to go to war in Iran or Pakistan or Russia or there or here. That's not the solution, because it wasn't the solution in Afghanistan in the first place. What I'm trying to say is that when this peace negotiation should be an inclusive one, all the countries should be involved, and they are indirectly involved, like it or dislike it. This is what is happening, unfortunately. If they don't accept it, those people on the ground will not be able to say yes. That's what it is, unfortunately. That's the reality in Afghanistan. So the most important thing is that we have to have those big superpowers or powerful countries to have some kind of regime in place, so that if any of the party breaches the terms of the agreement, first we need to have the agreement. That's the most important thing. That's got a lot of obstacles before us. So once we have that agreement, that it should not be breached, And it shouldn't be like the Taliban saying, okay, well, we will agree to the peace deal, and once the Americans withdraw, we'll do exactly what the Mujahideen did and take the power by force. Or the government says, okay, we will say now, okay, but later on, we will not accept the terms and conditions, and hence there's going to be the peace process will be shattered before it's it works. That's my point of view is basically. And as I said to you about the troublemakers in the region, we all know, we Americans, every single I've read the memoirs of almost all policymakers, and I use them in my book, maybe more than 15, 20 memoirs. And every single one of them knew what the causes of war in Afghanistan was. Every one of them knew. But they haven't been dealt with in a way that satisfies many people. And that's why a lot of questions are raised in Afghanistan by the ordinary people, that why we know what the problems are, why the problems are not dealt with. This was, sorry to answer this question, this was one of the major disagreements between President Karzai and the American administration. President Karzai kept telling them that the war is not in Afghanistan. You're fighting in the wrong country. You kill 10 Taliban today, tomorrow 20 Taliban comes from madrasa from the other side of the border. What then? You kill those 20.
You mean Pakistan?
The other side of the border, those places which is they call it the Pakhtunkhwa, which there are many madrasas, and I'm not saying this. George W. Bush says this in his memoir. President Obama says it in his conversation. Gates says it in his memoir. Ahmad Rashid, one of Pakistan's important journalists, he says it in his books. Hussain Haqqani, another important person in terms of understanding the politics, he says it. And many, many, many others, people from all sides of, memoirs by the British, those who worked in the British embassy in Afghanistan, diplomats and all that. So it's a common knowledge, and it's important that we listen to the original partners, their concerns, which they have some legitimate concerns, including terrorism, drug, illegal drug, and all that, and we have to deal with that. But it's also important that we should not allow any country to try to have a strategic depth in Afghanistan, because it's not
helping to end the war in Afghanistan. Okay, I think you have summarized your book and your arguments, and if you allow me, I want to move on the question session, because we have two questions. One from the Meshirin Orlu. He sent his question in written way in chat area. I am going to read it to you, and we have another one. Dr. Hussein Tabak raised his hand, and probably he is going to ask a question. But if you don't mind, I want to start with my questions. Sure, because you have always
Rahman, you already turned this talk, to a conversation between you and Sharifullah already. So it may be better if we raise our questions, then you can keep yours to the end, right?
Okay, so I will lower your hand, and it's about the completion of the Sharifullah presentation. And if you let me ask first, then I'm gonna give you the floor, if you don't mind.
All right.
Okay, you have emphasized the ordinary Afghans who are the main victims of this war.
Absolutely.
And I would like to ask the question to you for the audiences to hear the answer. I am just quoting from your book now. Many Afghans, for example, ask that if the US intervened in Afghanistan to destroy terrorism, then why did it leave now, when in fact there are more terrorist groups in Afghanistan?
Very true.
So this is the, as you mentioned in your book, that the question, one of the main questions of the many ordinary Afghan asks. So what's your question to this? What's your answer to this question?
Okay. Yes, when America intervened in Afghanistan, there was only the Taliban, and the Haqqani network was part of it. Gulbuddin Hekmatyar was not a force at the time. And
wasn't Al-Qaeda located in Afghanistan?
No, and Al-Qaeda, that's what I'm going to say, and Al-Qaeda. So that was the few groups. Now there are more than 22 groups in Afghanistan that are the terrorist groups. Yeah, 22 terrorist groups declared by America, the terrorist groups. And
so there were just 3. Now there are 22.
Yeah, there are 22. Yeah, that's more than according to President Ashraf Ghani. Yeah, maybe more. But that's the 22. He that's what he said in his many interviews, and I've read it many other in other documents as well. Why America intervened in Afghanistan and why it's leaving now? It's again because in my book I argue at the time when the 9/11 took place, the situation we have to take a look at the context that the decision to intervene in Afghanistan was made. There was a lot of pressure on George W. Bush to do something. There were fears that another attack could take place. And also there are the views of the new conservative that kept saying, this is the time, this is the opportunity for us Americans to get rid of terrorism worldwide. And also the characteristics of Bush himself. Bush was somebody who was making decisions without thinking so much about it. He wasn't very analytical, unlike Barack Obama. Barack Obama was very analytical. He would speak to he would speak to his policymakers, and then he will go and call professors from universities and ask them to come and see him, speak to previous administrations, policymakers such as Colin Powell, he spoke to about the Afghanistan war. So the policy war when they intervened in Afghanistan, that was made in that context. Why America is withdrawing now? The policy is being made in an entirely different context. We see the characteristics of Donald Trump is very different than Bush. He is not pro war, and we know that there are he's got some national views, and many people and the popular view in America is that we don't want any more endless wars, and hence America and also Afghanistan is being used as a political chip, basically, to get more votes. And the fact that the Americans were there for 20 years, they've learned that they could not win the war in the way they do. And also, in a way, this is what Americans are doing at the moment with billions of dollars a year. The Taliban has agreed to do it for free. Basically, you withdraw, we will take care of the security situation, we will take care of Daesh, we will take care of Al-Qaeda. We promise you that we will not spread our ideology beyond Afghanistan's border. That's not our aim. Our aim is to focus on our country, and because you are in our country, that is against our, against our religion, against our way of life, and hence we are fighting you. Otherwise, you're not our enemy. So those reasons again come into play, and hence the decision is made that they should withdraw.
Okay, so you mean that the different domestic contexts lead to these different decisions?
I think
regardless of the conditions in Afghanistan.
Absolutely, the condition in Afghanistan when they intervened, it wasn't a major issue. There are talks. People are saying that America intervened in Afghanistan because to save the oppressed Afghan women. Believe it or not, I studied the decision-making process of the war to intervene. And I mentioned that in my book. Apart from one time, one policymaker, and that's Rice, Dr. Rice, who was National Security Advisor at the time, she just made that point, just once. Never the Afghan woman, as long as because I studied many memoirs, many, even George W. Bush's memoir, I didn't see an evidence of that to prove that, oh, because they went to Afghanistan to save the oppressed Afghan women. Later on, they used democracy and all that, especially in Iraq when the Bush administration were failing, and then it thought, okay, let's just use those arguments that will help us within our country. So yeah, of course, domestic politics play an important part, but also international factors. Well, one of the factors is they've been there for 20 years and nothing's been happening. There are arguments that Afghanistan has been going from bad to worse. Those, I'm not saying this is the case, but there are arguments, and also because of the complicity of the region. Hence, the decision is, and coupled with what Donald Trump thinks of Afghanistan war, that's what is decided to withdraw. It might be a different issue if Joe Biden gets into power, if he wins the election. Also, Professor Rahman, it's very important to mention that it might be a different issue after the election when President Trump wins. He may change his view. He may change his view because at the moment he says things that make those people who vote for him, make them happy. And we know who they are. I've explained them already in my book. And once that's gone, that stage is past, things may change. So I hope I answered the question.
Okay. I think now it is the end of our dialogue. And it is time for the audiences raise their hands and ask their questions. And I think Hüsrev Tabak raised his hands. Before giving the floor to Dr. Hüsrev Tabak, I would like to mention that there are two questions, one from Mr. Mehmet Şirin Orla and the other one from Sezai Özçelik, Dr. Sezai Özçelik. Please ask your question by yourself via the microphone, because I don't want to read and just text the messages to the Dr. Sharifullah. I want to all the participants, we have just 16 people here, so I want to hear their voices and their affiliations and their names, and they can directly ask their question to Dr. Shcirifullah Dorani. So I am gonna first give the Hüsrev Tabak to floor and ask you can ask your question, Dr. Tabak.
Thank you very much, Rahman. And Shcirifullah, it was an excellent talk indeed. I really benefited a lot. I mean, in terms of grasping the ongoing politics in Afghanistan, and it was actually a fruitful conversation between you and Rahman, and actually covered most of my question. But again, I really wonder. I mean, in telling the story of Afghanistan and the war in Afghanistan, you probably intentionally keep mentioning that it was the U.S. Principally involving in war and in politics, but it was accompanied by a powerful international community, aka the NATO, right?
Yeah,
and also Turkey fought in there. I really wonder, what did they wrong? What did they do? I mean, what was wrong with their approach? I mean, because Turkey has close relations, for instance, with Pakistan, and then they even collaborate in certain measures. I mean, I really wonder, what do you think of their involvement in there? I mean, because you already said that the troublemakers are evident and self-revealing, but I mean, how did the international community deal with those troublemakers? I mean, what was wrong with the rest of the international community in dealing with the war? Thanks.
Right. It's a very good question. I deal with NATO's involvement in Afghanistan in my book quite in great detail. I think in chapter 4, I deal with it in chapter 5. And of course, Turkey is one of those nations that Afghanistan has had always a good relation. And Turkeys are one of those nations that always had and interest in Afghanistan in terms of a stable Afghanistan was stable, it was good for Turkey. So basically what he said, it did, and it's and people are even in many parts of the provinces that I spoke to people, when there were international groups, people were always asking for Turkish groups, and they were saying for obvious reason why, because they said we have similar culture and that we understand each other. So no, Turkey has been for the past, since the Afghan history I'm more familiar with, since the era of King Amanullah, that it's been a good country to us, and also it played many times really inspiring to many of our leaders, including King Amanullah, who was really well liked in Afghanistan. As for NATO, of course, when I talk about policy mistakes that made by America and the NATO powers, it doesn't mean that they haven't done great things in Afghanistan. Of course they have. We have a lot of good accomplishments in Afghanistan. We have a good political system. We have, although it's corrupt, it's not working, but the blame is not because the political system or a constitution is wrong. It's just, it's been exploited. We have freedom of press, freedom of expression, and there are thousands of miles of our roads have been built, and there are many countless achievements. Millions of our kids go to school, all that. And also, and Turkey, NATO, America played a great deal in that, so that the Afghan people eventually are grateful people, and they will be grateful. What is the problem is so this is the good stuff that they've done, including the Americans, including NATO. But on the other side, there were policy mistakes. What NATO, basically when they intervened in Afghanistan in 2002, America already making decision or focusing on policy making for Iraq. So they said we have to give some responsibility to NATO, and NATO took some responsibility. I think Germany was responsible for the police. Japan and England was responsible for disarming the warlords and the strongmen, and also dealing with the drugs, basically reducing the product of drug in Afghanistan. And Italy was responsible for the justice system. They were a bit slow in their approach. They were meant to send, I speak in my book, for many, many months, nobody was sent from those countries to train Afghans. So that's one of the mistakes. But also what also happened was that those NATO states, many of them just went to Afghanistan as much as they thought that it was good for them and for the international peace, but they also did it because they couldn't say no to America. That's one of the reasons. So they haven't given it their 100%, to be honest with you. That's my opinion. I might be wrong, but that's many people think that they haven't given it even their 100%. And Gates and Secretary of Defense Gates and many others think that NATO were basically a bit slow in their commitment. And after 2005, again, they were not. They were saying many of the countries, including Germany, were saying we're not going to involve in war because our constitutions only allowed that we should only. We are in Afghanistan, our troops to construct, not to fight. This is another thing that kept the American policymakers keep referring to and said that they shouldn't have let us fight. They should have joined us as well. But that's another thing. Why Afghanistan is where it is. Few things. Firstly, the policy mistakes I mentioned was one of the major reasons Afghanistan is here. If initially they had a really proper plan for Afghanistan, like they have for peace process. Think about it. For 2 years, they've been haggling the Taliban in America until they agreed on something. Whereas the policy for Afghanistan to intervene was made in about 7-8 days, and no details of the policy was fought for. all the focus was how to make the policy. So that's the policy mistakes made by NATO and America. One of the, and the second thing, for example, most of the money was going through the non-governmental organizations, NGOs. 90% of the money was going, relying on not good people in Afghanistan and bringing bad people to power. Those people who are bad, I mean this, I'm using the Afghan language, the people who were saying to me in Afghanistan, those who are who had been accused of human rights and other, and they were involved in previous wars, and relying on those people to provide security for the Afghans was something that the Afghans were not happy. And this is what a distance happened between the Afghans and the international community and the Afghan government. And again, they didn't have a proper economic plan for Afghanistan. Every country was having their own plan. There was not a unified plan by NATO and America, and also interference by the international community. I say in my book, and many Afghans have told me, the mother of the problem in Afghanistan is the regional interference, and there are elements from all those countries. I'm not saying that the entire Pakistani military establishment is involved. No, it's just certain elements. I'm not saying the entire Iran's military establishment is involved. No, certain elements from those countries interfere in Afghanistan. And this interference, coupled with mistakes by NATO, and also giving power to bad people in Afghanistan, to people who are not meant to be in power, basically took Afghanistan where it is, it is today. And after Barack Obama came into power, the good relations going bad with Russia, of course, didn't help. Iran, relations going bad with Iran, America and Iran didn't help, because those countries one of the ways to get back to America is Afghanistan, where they could physically hurt America, and financially, and in any way, and emotionally. So that's why, unfortunately, a war that we thought would be over in months took years, and it'll go forever if the major causes are not dealt with. No matter, I say it in my book in the final chapter and the final paragraph, if the root causes of Afghanistan is not dealt with, no matter how many years, decades, or centuries America remain in Afghanistan, nothing will change.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. And I would like to give the floor to the Mr. Shirin Orlu, but he already did it. I think you can hear me. If you want, you can ask your question directly. Shirin, are you there?
Yeah, thanks, sir. Hear me now?
Okay. Yeah, you can.
Yes,
you ask your question now.
All right, thank you for allowing me to ask the question. So my question is to Dr. Sharifullah. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, of course, Shirin. Hello.
All right. So the Dr. Sharifullah said there is obstacles between the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So what are these obstacles, and what is the position and the role of the United States for these obstacles, and what to do to get over these obstacles and establish the security and the peace in Afghanistan? Thank you.
Yes, it's a very good question, and this is a question that's going to be the major points for the next few weeks, months, maybe years, that the Taliban and the Afghan government will be talking and haggling in Qatar, Doha. Firstly, as I was mentioning it with Professor Rahman initially, those parties you see in Afghanistan, the domestic parties, whoever you see, they have, unfortunately, sadly, not all of them, many of them have got international donors who are helping them. So it's very important that their international donors are happy. And unfortunately, those international powers that support them have got conflicting interests in Afghanistan. That's the major issue in Afghanistan. For example, I'll tell you an example. India see a Taliban power in Kabul against its national interests, whereas Pakistan sees a Taliban government in Afghanistan good for its interests, because for obvious reasons. Okay, that's one thing. Iran would like to have certain groups in Afghanistan have more say due to their religious, connectivity and stuff. Saudi Arabia wants other groups to be more in power. Just a few examples I'm giving you. So that's one of the obstacles. Hoping to these different countries, because of those different conflicting interests, it's very difficult to find a solution that could meet the interests of every single government, every single country in Afghanistan. Second is the Taliban sees the Afghan constitution not in line with their Islamic views. There are disagreements on women's rights, on human rights. They don't accept human rights as in chartered by the United Nations, because they see it as something imposed on them. It's incompatible with their religious beliefs. That's another obstacle. The other obstacle is ceasefire. The Afghan government says we have to cease fire before we start talk, and the Taliban says, what's the point of having a ceasefire if we need to, if there is no war, then why we are negotiating here? So we can't stop the war until we have an agreement in place. Another issue is whether we want a republic or emirate. The Taliban want emirate, whereas the Ghani is insisting on republic. President Ashraf Ghani. The Taliban sees Ghani as puppets to America. Ghani and his government sees Taliban puppets to Pakistan. So that's another thing. The Taliban wants to have, I think that would be argued later on, but I was reading, they came across that they want an interim government. So they don't want Ghani to work under Ghani. They want basically to have an interim government that none of the Kabul regime at the moment that's in power shouldn't be there. And Ghani wouldn't accept that. He says one of the major mistakes that President Najibullah at the time made was to say that I'm going to resign. Ghani will not resign. So that's another thing. Also, when we say the Taliban, it's not just one group. It's made of several groups, and there are hardliners who are even not happy with the peace talks. They want, the only way for them is to basically fight their way and get Kabul by force and establish an Islamic government. They shouldn't talk to the Americans. They shouldn't talk to any power. And why they should talk? Because they're winning anyway. I'm going to come to that last point late. There are many in Kabul who still distrust the Taliban, particularly the minorities, women in particular. And they keep saying that the Taliban have not changed their radical views. It's still the same. If they come, they will remove all the rights that they've achieved during this 20 years, all that accomplishment. And also there are many in US, basically, that are not happy with it. Today, Zalmay Khalilzad was talking to the Senate, and one of the senators said to him, do you really think that a peace settlement will take place? For me, it's a fantasy. And he asked him another question. He said, what if the Taliban executed 100 women in Ghazi Stadium? Would that be a breach of the agreement? And Khalilzad said, yes, it would be, but. So, and there are other issues. I've mentioned a few of them. The most important thing is, can the deal be trusted between the Taliban and the Afghan government? That's the most important thing. That's the most important thing. And I think I talked, I'm just going to make one point that which is not related to your question as well, but it's important that I keep talking in the, during my talk, it came across as if I am pro-Afghan government. No, I have issues with the Afghan government. They should deal with the corruption. They're not dealing. There are a lot of shortcomings on the Afghan government side as well. And also, it's very important for the Afghan government, for the Afghans, and the Afghans know that the Taliban are not an international power, or they are Afghans themselves. They are our, I could have been a Talib if I was in a province born where the Taliban are. To my father, for example, we never immigrated to England. I am from a part of Afghanistan, which that part of Afghanistan is in the hands of the Taliban. So I could have been a Talib if, it's that we all brothers in Afghanistan. Afghans should stop fighting each other under the name of the Taliban, under the name of the Afghan government, so they should stick together. So that point, importantly, I have to make, because it will come across as if I am pro the Afghan government, pro-American, not the Taliban. The Taliban is just being used, unfortunately, for other countries' benefits. And so these are the few obstacles. What should be done? And that's a very important thing, important question, and the entire questions, because what needs to be done is this, is that once there is an agreement between the Americans and the Taliban, it's important that powerful countries like Great Britain, like America, like Pakistan, like Iran, like and regional countries like Turkey, like India, Russia, their interests should be all met. It shouldn't be another Bonn conference in 2001 when one country was happy, the other was not happy. That was a mistake made in 2001. Pakistan's influence in Afghanistan went from 100% to zero in a period of 1 month. And if that happens, it's not going to be acceptable, and hence the war continued. So it's important to listen to all the countries' concerns, to their legitimate concerns, and deal with them, and have a regime in place that no party should be allowed to breach the terms of the agreement once the agreement is once the agreement is made. Then everybody would be happy and everybody be scared at the same time that if I breach the agreement, if I breach the terms, there will be consequences. So no, I'm not going to do this. That's a very important moment for the Afghans, and they should get together. They should start calling each other this and that. You're Talib, you're all brothers. We have to sit down together and make our country. So I hope I answered your questions.
And I think the term is Mr. Dr. Sezai Özçelik. Are you here? If you could unmute yourself and you can ask your questions directly to Dr. Shcirifullah Dorani. Thank you. Dr. Özçelik, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Dorani. I am coming from different point of view. I studied conflict resolution and nonviolence, and I wrote some pieces about nonviolence and Islam. And I studied Abdul Ghaffar Khan or Badshah Khan. He's a Pashtun leader.
I know him.
You know him, yes.
I know.
My question is, I am coming from because you talk about mostly realism, the hardcore realism thing, and I want to know your opinion about non-violence. Is it possible? Because my thinking is there is, from Afghanistan, Abdul Ghaffar Khan is a Pashtun leader. Frontier Gandhi is coming from. So I believe that there is a a soul in the Afghanistan about the non-violence. Still, I believe that, because yes, there is a Taliban and a lot of bad things happens in Afghanistan, but still Afghan people and Afghan, as a Pashtun Afghan leader, they created a Gandhi, Muslim Gandhi, Abdul Ghaffar Khan. So do you think that there is a inner resources for the peace in Afghanistan? I know that there is a loyal Jirga in Afghanistan that can play an important role. And you mostly talk about the outside forces, international actors about the peace. But how about the Afghanistan inside? I mean, is it possible that Afghan people come together for peace? And I believe that because, like I said, they achieved with Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Why don't you do they achieve it right now? Thank you very much for your answer.
Yes, it's a great question. I agree with you. I agree with you. There is the Afghan, the Pashtun people, they have a code of conduct, what we call Pashtunwali. And my novel is solely based on that, what are the Pashtunwali, and it's somehow implemented in my novel in great detail. And unfortunately, one of the sources of the war in Afghanistan is, I wouldn't say unfortunately, I don't know how, it's basically one of the principle of Pashtunwali says that if you are attacked, you have to attack back. You have to take, they call it badal. So if you are attacked, you have to attack. And of course, Jirga is another thing that all the elderly sit and they peacefully resolve an issue. And it has been successful for many, many decades, for centuries. It's a great thing, the two families fight with each other. And as there is badal in Afghanistan, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to, there are examples that people have killed 12 or 13 of each other because of badal. But when Jirga comes in, it says basically what is gone wrong is wrong. They find a peaceful solution between the families, and hence everything is resolved. So it's great. Yes, of course. My belief is as well that until the Afghans themselves do not come together, sit together and think carefully why we have been fighting. Why? Yesterday, when I was called communist, you were called Mujahid, and we fought for 20 years or for 15 years. We killed each other, millions of us. Why did we do that? Today, you are called American puppet, and you are called this puppet or that puppet, and we are fighting each other. Why is that? So it's important, of course, until the Afghans do not come together, sit together, which I'm very happy for those Afghans who are sitting in Doha, to solve their internal conflict. Nobody could help us to do it. So yes, of course, that's you pointed out an important point. We always solved our problems in Afghanistan through peace. Unfortunately, since the Soviet invasion, things have changed. Unfortunately, those, I talk in my book, very unfortunately, those elders who were talking about Jirga and talking about peaceful ways, they were assassinated, many of them in the past 20, 30 years. Again, because they were coming in the way of foreign powers who wanted war in Afghanistan. And that Jirga system, unfortunately, is not very strong, especially where there are the Taliban. Of course, in Kabul, there are the Afghan government, so we don't see that Jirga a lot, but Jirga was very much in use in provinces in Afghanistan. And but we still see plenty of it is still going on. Actually, I was talking to somebody, they had an issue the other day in Jalalabad. It's a province, so they're going to have a Jirga, so they have to have, it still keeps happening. But as much as it was enforced, it's not. It's basically today, if you do something in Kabul, it's the Afghan government will deal with it. And if you do it in a place where the Taliban are in power, unfortunately, a Talib commander is a judge, as executioner and everything. So he's he could be a young man, and he'll basically say, this is what Sharia says, and that's what you should be, and the Sharia law will apply to you. So things are a bit complicated at the moment. Of course, it still is, and it's an important point. We Afghans should be always relying on it. So yes, I agree with you. And this non-violence thing, of course, we had our own Gandhi, which was, he was referred to as Gandhi Pacha Khan, who was buried in he's buried now in Jalalabad. And yeah, we're very proud of him. So hopefully that will be relied on. I'm hoping that those people who are in Doha, that they will rely on his, you know, on our ancestors' way of doing things, which was jirga, which was always solve your issues through peace. But again, because of the involvement, as I said in first thing, the obstacle, because of the involvement, so many international powers in Afghanistan, that's why it's not been happening, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And I think the line is Dr. Rashid wanted to ask a question. If you can hear me, you may take the floor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Rahman Hujam, and thank you so much, Dr. Dorani, for your talk. It was extremely interesting.
Thank you.
You mentioned Hussein Haqqani in your talk briefly. He's actually a friend of mine, although he's senior to me. He was a colleague of mine at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace back in 2003 or 4. He argued in recent years, before the rise of Imran Khan to power in Pakistan, that Imran Khan was somebody who was politically very naive, and that when it came to important policy issues, especially with regards to security and Afghanistan, that Imran Khan was largely under the control of the military establishment. Now, after Imran Khan actually succeeded in winning the elections and surprised many people in doing so, Hussein Haqqani has continued to say the same thing about him. Although I personally see him as having played a rather positive role in bringing, say, the Americans and the Taliban to the negotiating table, along with the Qataris as well. So, in your view, Dr. Dorani, do you think that Imran Khan is a non-entity in the source, that that he does not have control over the army and the ISI, but rather that they have control over him? And do you see the Pakistani role in Afghanistan changing in any substantial way under Imran Khan? Thanks.
Yeah, two very great questions. Yes. Okay. Let me just say, okay. According to many sources that I read, that is Ahmed Rashid, you mentioned Hussein Haqqani, and many others, it is very difficult to succeed in election in Pakistan if you don't have the blessing of the military establishment. So that's I hope your first question is answered. It's very difficult. And those who have succeeded in certain cases have not stayed long. They didn't stay long for different reasons. They were basically, you know, their tenure was very short. And secondly, I think regarding the peace process so far, it would be wrong of me to say that Pakistan has not played a positive role. I think in the last 1 year or so, at least with what we see on the surface, it has played a positive role. It must have put pressure on the Taliban to come to the negotiation table. And also the Pakistanis are always argued, and I understand that argument, that they do not have 100% influence on the Taliban as well. The Taliban are an independent force, and they are in Pakistan. Of course, they are grateful for them, but they could not do everything what the Pakistanis are telling them. Like Ashraf Ghani or Karzai wouldn't do everything that the Americans are telling them. You know, we saw that when Americans wanted Karzai to sign the agreement, the security agreement in 2014 and 13, and Karzai said, no, I'm not going to sign it. And the Americans couldn't do anything. So there is this argument when they say we don't have 100% influence. I think that's to a certain extent right. But yes, yes, Imran Khan played a strong part in that by trying to get the Taliban to the negotiating table, and also the Trump administration, through the pressure that it applied on Pakistan, that played a part. And also Pakistan thought, how many more years if I will, doing this thing? And they've been suffering. I mean, the Pakistani people in particular have been suffering from terrorism, from drugs, all the blowback from Afghanistan. The Pakistani people are great people. I've stayed there for many years in Pakistan. It's a great country, and it's the people are victims of terrorists themselves. So perhaps there might have been a thought in Pakistan, those who were supporting, those elements who were supporting the Taliban, that we cannot do this for indefinitely. Let's just have have that negotiation talks, and if it succeeds, after a government, the Taliban at least will be somehow in power, and the Afghan government, and at least there would be no danger from Afghanistan. So I think, yes, he did play a part, Imran Khan, and I still believe that any prime minister that making decisions in Afghanistan, specifically when it comes to foreign policy regarding India, Afghanistan, America, Saudi Arabia, Iran, but most importantly, Afghanistan, Iran, America. When those prime ministers make the policy regarding these countries, I am sure they will, I think they will be, they have to make those policies that are compatible with the views of the military. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult for them to, in my opinion, to survive, because the documents I've read, and many Pakistanis would agree with that, the military establishment is very powerful in Pakistan. In my book, I mentioned that 70 to 80, a great majority of people trust the military establishment in Pakistan, sees it as the only establishment that keeps Pakistan together, and that has provided peace and security in Pakistan, and hence the public opinion is also on their side. Therefore, it will be very difficult for any person to go against their wishes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see that we have another question from Dr. Marco Marsili. Marco Marsili, would you like me to read your question to Dr. Dorani, or you can ask your question directly to him? Which way do you want to prefer?
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Rahman, no, you can ask it directly. It's not a problem. Anyway, it's a brief question. It's about the illegal invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. I mean, the American and the NATO invasion. That I mean, it's questioned whether it was legal or illegal. I have my own opinion, of course, but I'd like to have your opinion too, whether this invasion in December 2001 was lawful or not. Thanks very much.
Okay, that's okay. This is a very, very good question. It depends on the perspective of the person. When I talk to Afghans, certain Afghans said to me, in Afghanistan, the decision is lawful because it has been authorized by the United Nations. And hence it's different than the decision that the Russian invaded us back in 1979. Others said to me, no, it's unlawful, because who is at the end of the day the United Nations? The United Nations is also a hand of America and international powers, and hence it's unlawful. And so it's a very difficult question. It's a very, very difficult question. all I can tell you is this, that I am in favor of the American troops getting out of Afghanistan, leaving Afghanistan to its own people. This way we are more happy with when we deal with our own affairs. But at the same time, I also want to add that this withdrawal should be responsible. It should not be based on the realities in Washington, but it should be based on the realities in Afghanistan. And, and it should only happen when we have a stable, strong, secure government in Kabul in place so that it could take care of its own affairs. And with a little bit of international help. That without international help, we wouldn't be able to survive. Even if the Taliban comes into power tomorrow, they will still be relied on the international aid. Otherwise, they can't survive. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your opinion. Thanks. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, Rahman.
Okay. Okay. I don't see any more coming questions from the audiences now. If you are ready, I am gonna bombard you with more questions.
Yes, go on, please. Yes,
Okay.
I'm looking forward to questions. So that's why I had a shorter presentation so that I could answer questions.
Okay. You know, actually, you have answered a bit most part of my question, but don't you think that you sometimes seem that the scapegoating Pakistan because of the issues in Afghanistan? Okay, there is a war in Afghanistan. US invaded Afghanistan. I think the Marco thinks in the same way. It's an invasion, not the legal way. Just confirming. Okay, but okay, there is an Afghan issues. I read the book and I know that most of the Americans, when they are talking about their decision on the Afghan war, they just arguing that they have this still primitive culture and we don't have to democratize them, then we don't have to modernize them. So just withdraw all the soldiers and the monies we are spending for these primitive people. And they sometimes justify their decision in this way. Okay, Afghan war, Americans involved and the Afghans involved. So I agree that the Pakistan has a regional power to interfere in the Afghanistan affairs. That's for sure. But sometimes that you are scapegoating Afghanistan for all the problems scapegoating Pakistan, all the issues in Afghanistan. If somebody argues in this way, what would you say that?
I think one of the reviewers has said that, Rahman, to be fair to you. He said that. He said that I basically put all the blame on. Yes, I understand. We have our own problems. We Afghans have made a lot of mistakes. For Seaman Zar. Seaman Zar is in Afghan language for money and for power. Those complicities I mentioned in the book, they do exist in Afghanistan, but they have never been, they have been to a certain extent, but not to the extent now, any source of problem. Because as I talk about it in the four decades of the King era, that problem wasn't there as much as it is now. And I'm not just scapegoating Pakistan, it's just the other regional powers. And also, in addition to that, we Afghans have to, we also have a part to blame. We've made mistakes, a lot of mistakes, especially we are very good at winning wars. But after wars finished, when we meant to come together to make a peaceful government, we are not good at that. We start fighting with each other, and that's not good. That's happened after the Russians withdrew from Afghanistan. Mujahideen and the Afghan government fought. and you know, and then again now, and you would be surprised, even though that today the Americans withdraws from Afghanistan, tomorrow the Taliban will come and there will be fight going on again between the Taliban and Daesh. Then the Daesh will be saying, you're not Muslim enough, I'm gonna come, I'm more Muslim than you. So yes, it's not just that I mentioned all the mistakes made during this 20 years. And one of them was, of course, I do not talk a lot about the Afghans because in the book, of course, that's right. But I agree with you that we also made mistakes. We should be blamed for it. At the end of the day, if we accept foreign powers money for doing, for killing our own people, it's us we're doing it. They don't come here do it. We do it. So we have to take some responsibility. And I hope that they understand in Qatar today that they should take care of it. And another thing, in Qatar we have the Taliban group negotiators, and we send a group from Kabul, about 20 to 25 of them. Some of those members are young men because they are children to the elite, so they have to be in that group. But it's not bad that to have youngsters in the group. But what I'm trying to say is that the Taliban are very skillful negotiators. You have to have people who have experience. You have to have people who have got the knowledge, not just like, you know, a young person, 19, 20 years. They may not have as much knowledge as a person who's been 20 years in politics. They might argue the case better. But anyway, these are small mistakes. We made a mistake, you know, after 1992 when the Soviet Union withdrew. The fought between Mujahideen between 1992 and 1996. It was between the Mujahideen. They were killing each other. So there was, you know, of course, there were powers helping them from abroad, from outside. But can we not blame them as well? So yes, it's not just that. There's a lot of other issues going on. Unfortunately, the Afghanistan complicity has been an issue. As I mentioned, the poverty, unemployment, high rate of unemployment, presence of different ethnic groups, although it's great because we have to have in a garden is when you have different flowers, and we should cherish this. But unfortunately, these differences have been exploited. That's what I'm trying to say. So I agree with you. Yeah, we should take some blame. We should take some blame.
Okay, thank you very much. And please let me take you to the book again, because when you are talking about Afghanistan's realities, I think you fell into the issues, and you are acting like you are re-experienced Afghanistan war, if I am not wrong, because you're internalizing the issue is at the high level now. I think you are talked to too much, and maybe you have your own memories, and sometimes I feel that you are just dreaming about Afghanistan. So please let me take you to the book again.
Sure.
You have talked about a concept that the war cabinet, and you have already said that in your book that there is no war cabinet in the US, but you have added some of the influential positions in the bureaucratic level, state secretary and defense secretary in the Pentagon and CIA, FBI. You have named all the bureaucratic organizations into this cabinet. So what is the main difference between the Bush, Obama and Trump war cabinets? How they are working? Because all the 6 decisions you have said in your book that they have been made within these 3 U.S. administration. So what is the characteristic that separates these 3 administrations?
Short answer. The Bush administration was less analytical. The Obama administration was very analytical. And the Trump administration is unknown. It's been the way it still works. Not many people know how it works. Although, having said that, Trump listened to all point of views and then agreed with the pro-military group to say, okay, we will send troops to Afghanistan. So, but when it came to Obama, Obama allowed every single person to talk, and he listened and he thought about it. And Bush did not allow. It did not talk about the details of policy. It did not. The focus was how to make a policy. That's all. Not other details that was meant to be talked about, such as realities on the ground. For example, if Bush and President Bush and the cabinet thought about the problems, the issues going between Afghanistan and Pakistan for decades, especially the Durand line, which which Afghans do not accept as a border, whereas Pakistan says no, that's we accept it as an international border and that's part of us. That issues, which is one of the main issues that's the cause of the problem, according to many. So if they talked about that and at least understood about it, they would have probably thought maybe we would not get as much support from Pakistan as we hope so, because of those decades-long issues between the two countries. So yeah, did I answer your question, I hope?
Yeah, I think so, but your answer becomes the source of another question, which is to ask. The way of the making a decision and formulate a policy on Afghanistan. And it seems that by the end of first term of the Bush administration and in the second term, and in Obama and the Trump terms as well, these all three administrations, one way or another, realized that they have to withdraw their forces from the Afghanistan, but they feel obligation to stay there. If it is domestic or if it is moral, it doesn't matter. But so all the discussions comes to the one end. I think they all want to leave from Afghanistan, left all the responsibilities to the Afghan National Security Forces, and just keep enough military power to secure the maybe American embassy and some air bases in Afghanistan. So don't you think that regardless of the administration in the US, the couple of years after the Afghan war in 2004 or in 2005, they have to get a decision which is close to that one I am saying now. So why the US has to stay there in Afghanistan almost 2 decades? I don't know how long the Vietnam War extended, but I think it's one of the longest war in modern history, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So why even they want to leave Afghanistan, they can't?
Yes, that's a very good question. The
just a minute before you start your answer, I think Marco tried to say something that I don't want to interrupt you again. Okay, Marco.
I've got your answer anyway. Okay, do you want Marco?
No, it was just a question. A confirmation on Rahman's statement that is the longest conflict still ongoing in Afghanistan. Is the longest conflict ongoing between the last century and this century. That is something that is very strange. Until 1 year ago, the longest conflict was the one in Colombia.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. The agreement with the FARC. Thanks. It was just for.
Okay. Thank you for this information. Thank you.
Yes, they call
it the longest one now.
It is the longest one.
Okay.
Yeah, it was even in 2019 when I finished my book, so it was the longest one, especially longest America's war involvement. I think Vietnam lost it from not as much, less than that. Every single administration wanted to leave Afghanistan. No, the Bush administration, as far as my book is concerned, as far as my research is concerned, never decided to leave Afghanistan up to the end. Because once they intervened in Afghanistan in 2002, And up to 2005, and then they invaded, Afghanistan was a success story, and then they invaded Iraq. And in Iraq, they got embroiled in Iraq, all the things that went in Iraq, people died, the sectarian violence. And then in 2007, General Petraeus came into power, and then they employed the counterinsurgency strategy, and the counterinsurgency strategy became successful, in brackets. And by the time that that war was successful, the Bush's administration turned its focus on Afghanistan. By then, Afghanistan was not, the war was going in the wrong direction. So Bush wanted to employ a counterinsurgency strategy. The assessment was, there were several assessments, and all the assessments said that probably a counterinsurgency strategy would help in Afghanistan, because at the moment we were employing counterterrorism strategy, and that does not work. We have to have more troops on the ground so that they could go and live with the population and fight the Taliban, and hence we should apply it. So never a question of we should leave Afghanistan during the Bush administration was discussed. Never even raised, in my opinion. I didn't see any sign of it. And by the time Bush wanted to employ the counterinsurgency strategy, the Obama administration got in touch with Bush and said, okay, can we leave that for, can you leave this for us? We will decide with Afghanistan. And as Bush in his memoir said, he said he secretly passed all the assessments to the Obama administration and told them, you guys do whatever you want is right. During the Obama administration, the first time that it happened, and then what Obama did was, I think there was a 15,000 or 10,000 request for troops by General, forgot the name of the American general, and Obama straight away accepted it. Said, okay, yeah, in March, if you remember, there was a review by the CIA analyst at the time, I forgot his name. After that review, Obama accepted the 15,000 troops, and he said, that's fine, and go and deal with it, and made the AFPAC strategy as well. It was AFPAC strategy or another strategy, I forgot. The issue of withdrawing troops from Afghanistan was raised when in March Obama approved that strategy, and in August an assessment by McChrystal was leaked. In that assessment, McChrystal asked for 40,000 extra troops. And then Joe Biden turned around to Obama and said, listen, we've got some 40,000 or so troops in Afghanistan. I don't exactly remember the number. We've approved another 50,000. And then they asked for another 40,000. So that's becoming a Vietnam War. And it's going to be your failure. By the time you leave, if you approve this 40,000, we will have 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. And each troop is cost £1 million a year, $1 million, I'm sorry, I think. So it's like 100 million or a billion, I think. I don't know how much, but it was quite a lot of money. I remember that each troop cost 1 million, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I said, that's not going to happen. Let's have a proper review of the Afghanistan war. At this stage, the talk started about withdrawing from Afghanistan because it's going in the right direction. At the time, there was one senator, I think I forgot his name, he became later the Secretary of Defense as well himself. He telling Biden that this is becoming another Vietnam. This is becoming another Vietnam. We're not winning because of those reasons. And yes, at the time they said they're going to withdraw, but because of the military pressure and the domestic pressure, and let me tell you, there is still this pressure in America, not to such an extent, but there are still many people who believe that we should stay in Afghanistan because this is the right course to stay in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, they say, is not just, we're not staying in Afghanistan because Afghanistan is a platform for us to fight terrorist groups in the region. If we come out of Afghanistan, then we will lose that platform. We will lose an ally who's helping us and letting us to stay in his country. So that argument still goes on. But at the time, the argument was stronger by the military and by many others. So Obama had no choice because he was a Democrat. He would have been accused of not being aggressive enough against terrorist groups. Hence, he accepted the strategy. By the time he accepted it, the troops went, it took 1 or 2 years. And then he said he's going to reduce the 30,000. And then he thought, okay, I'm going to incrementally reduce, gradually reduce the other troops. But again, by 2016, we know what the situation became in the Middle East. In Iraq, Iraq was half of the Iraq, or more than that, was captured by Daesh. Syria was going in the right direction. So Obama said, okay, if I withdraw troops from Afghanistan, there is also Daesh, and that the Afghan government may. And the prediction was that he wouldn't even last for, in brackets, in second. And I said, if I withdraw that troops, I'm going to be, there's going to be a lot of more pressure from domestic opinion. And also, it's not a wise decision. So it left the troops there. Again, once Trump came into power, the two sides came together. One side was telling Trump, particularly his son-in-law, and I forgot his name, the one who was his, I forgot his name anyway. He was a nationalist himself. He was telling him, withdraw the troops. But McMaster, who was a Secretary of Defense, and, I think he was the National Security Advisor, I forgot now. So, and the Defense Department was still asking for more troops. And hence, Trump accepted it. So at the moment, what's happening, why they're withdrawing the troops is because the Middle East is not that bad. And also Trump is somehow now is not giving in too much to public opinion. He's just wanting to make his base happy. And he wants to withdraw the troops. But I still believe, Professor Rahman, that they may not withdraw all the troops after that set deadline, because the talks will continue. And I think there would be a lot of pressure if they do so and Afghanistan governments collapse.
Next year in March, I think it is agreed that all the American troops will leave Afghanistan. In
Next, absolutely.
2021 March?
Yes, that's set date. But the peace talks may continue. And well, this is one thing with, as I say it in my book, with President Trump, you never know. Okay. He's just making decisions like that. And one tweet. Yeah.
We have 10 minutes left. Actually, we have time to go on. We don't have to follow all the time restricts in the program, but I think it is going to be almost 2 hours, and we have 2 more questions. One from coming from Dr. Marco Massini, and the other one from Dr. Roman Fernandez. I think Roman Fernandez was first, so I will give the microphone to the Dr. Roman Fernandez to ask a question. Please, we have just 10-15 minutes at most. Just keep your questions short and keep your answer short, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Hello, Rahman. Merhaba. I understand you're ill. I hope you get well very soon. Well, I mean, I had written the question. The issue is, and I'll make a parallel with US foreign policy towards the Middle East. My question is whether you think that the different decisions and actions took by President Bush, Obama, and Trump respectively, whether they reflect simple different tactics towards the issue of Afghanistan, of terrorism, or whatever you want to call it, or whether you think there are strategic differences that matter, that are really different in terms of US foreign policy towards Afghanistan. Let me make a very quick, very brief parallel towards the Middle East, the rest of the Middle East. If you think, for example, of Obama and Trump, most of the concern they had, both of them, is towards containing Iran, but with different tactics. For example, Obama, signed the JCPOA. He brought the EU together. He tried to get sort of a coalition of the international community to contain the issue of the concerns towards Iran. If you think of Trump, he threw away the JCPOA. He allied with the monarchies of the Gulf and so on and so forth. We all know, I'm not going to continue, I'll be brief. But the question is, towards that problem, whether that is simply different tactics, or whether we have a different strategy a different US foreign policy strategy towards the Middle East. Now, the same question I'm asking with reference, I haven't read your book, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I will, but I mean, the question I'm asking is, what's your take on that? Or what's your view? Are we talking about different tactics, or are we talking about different strategies as well? Thank you very much.
That's a very good question. You know, when I was in Afghanistan talking to the Afghan people, and they would say to me, no matter who becomes a president in America, it's the same strategy they follow. That's, you know, that they have what they want to do. Their strategy is even set for 100 years. So there is no change in the strategy, just a different driver, the same route, the same. Yeah. But no, I disagree. I think it's not that. Imagine if we had Hillary Clinton in power, things would have been much different than now in relation to Afghanistan, at least I could say. President Bush saw terrorism as evil. He was a religious person, and America a good force for relieving the world from evil. That's his point of view, one way of seeing it. President Obama was different. He was very analytical. He did not see the Taliban as an enemy. Bush saw it. Bush said, "I'm not." There were initially suggestions to talk to the Taliban initially, to include them in the Bonn agreement in 2001 or 2002. Initially, when America intervened, I think it was 2001, late 2001. Rumsfeld and Bush said no. So that, I think it all depends on their personal views. And in my book, I focus a lot on belief systems. What are their belief systems? Bush had strong belief systems. He would talk to somebody, and he would trust that person, and he would say that person would not deceive me. And he did, like he said regarding the Putin. He said, I looked him into the eyes and I said he meant good. But for Obama, he was analytical. He had strong belief systems, but he was more practical. He was more of a practical person. That's what he said. We need to talk to the Taliban. We need to withdraw. And I think more or less the same with, I'm not sure what sort of belief systems Donald Trump has, because in the book I refer to 4 or 5 sources. One is populism. The other one is realism, protectionism, and there are other sources that I mentioned. Also his own belief system as a businessman, he see things. So in my opinion, it wasn't technical thing. It was mainly based in their belief systems, and also who their advisors were. That's also play an important part. In the Bush administration, the advisor that had more of a say was the neoconservatives. They were very powerful. They had to say, their views were listened to. But in the Obama administration, Biden was listened to, although the belief system of General Petraeus played an important part by increasing the war. But at the end of the day, Biden won the argument, and Obama decreased the military force. And as for Trump, in my opinion, one chapter I dedicated to Trump's belief system. I believe that Trump is thinking, especially now regarding Afghanistan, more about gaining more votes than thinking what's going to happen to America's long-term interest in the region or to the Afghan fate. I think he's thinking like a businessman, how to gain more votes by using Afghanistan. Did I answer your question, Professor? No, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you. Cheers.
We have 3 minutes left, and Marco Marsilio needs to leave in 18:30. I think you can ask your question and you can leave.
I'll be very brief.
Yeah. Very brief. It's coming back to the previous question that Rahman posed. It's about and what we have.
Victor.
So far. I think that, of course, the invasion of Afghanistan, the American intervention in Afghanistan, had the popular support by the American people in the aftermath of the 9/11, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but after a couple of years, it's not so much popular due to the fact that they bring back body bags every week.
Absolutely.
So there are many casualties. So it's hard to support after 20 years. You do not understand why you're still there. But I think that the Americans always think that they have a simplified, a very simple framework of these problems. They think that there is always a military solution. They haven't learned anything from lessons from the past, like from Vietnam. They always think that there is a military solution. They do not think what's next. So I think that the turning point, the difference between this administration you talked about, I mean the Bush administration, the Obama and the Trump administration, lies in the fact that during his second term, Barack Obama decided to appoint a special envoy for countering Daesh, that was Brad McGluck, that resigned when Trump came to power, and to appoint a special envoy to Afghanistan to help to accompany this process towards peace. And I think that these decisions taken by the Obama administration to understand the complexity of the reality in these countries on the soil, it's a turning point for the solution that could never been a military solution, but should be in a political framework. It's different. You have to know the history, the habit, the habits, the custom of the people living there. You cannot think to export your Western model, and you cannot think that it's so easy. You go there with the troops and everything is solved.
I mean, you know, everything you said, it was more of a statement. I agree with everything you said. That's very true. And that is because of that analytical approach of Barack Obama in 2009 in the AFPAC review, a lot of the complicities actually surfaced. Then they understood how complex the Afghanistan war is. And regarding the special envoy, yes, I think that special envoy played an important part, especially when Khalilzad was appointed. Khalilzad has got tremendous knowledge of the Afghanistan war. I think he knows a great deal about Afghanistan because he's been involved in the war since somehow, you know, since the beginning of the Soviet Union, because he was at the time working for President Reagan. So he knows a great deal. And I always said in my book, and many times I repeated it, that military solution is not the solution. Going to war with countries, not the solution. The solution is in talks, in peace talks. We should sit down together, spend as long as we want. And I think in this way, in this regard, I think the Trump administration should be applauded that at least they brought about what's happening now in Doha, because not many administration would have been brave enough to do so. So that is, we should, you know, when good thing is due to say about somebody, we have to say it. That is, they have to be applauded for that. Zalmay Khalilzad worked very hard around the clock to bring the Afghans together. There are a lot of complicities, but yes, hopefully, you know, this solution, that peace settlement is an historical opportunity for us. Let's hope that works. And I agree everything you said. Absolutely, this is exactly, you summarized my book in in few words.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dorani. Your presentation, was very, very informative and interesting. Sorry, I had to leave, but I have an online lecture. I'm sorry, I can't.
No worries. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have consumed all the 2 hours we have for the book discussion session, and I believe that it is quite fruitful and intellectually satisfied. I believe so. I hope you agree with me on that issue. And I really appreciate for your contribution to the conference, Dr. Sharifullah Dorani. Thank you very much. Okay, just a minute. My son is involved. Okay.
That's all right.
Thank you very much again for your contribution and for the participants and audiences. I think this is the end of the day, so we really well deserved a rest for the night. And thank you very much for everything. and good night. I think that's the end of the.
Thank you.
There's
Thank you,
one more
Professor.
panel though, isn't there? Later?
I don't think so. It is 8:30 here, and in Lisbon it is 6:30, and they
Right.
don't work after 7.
Okay.
Professor Rahman, thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're
It's
welcome.
been really a great pleasure to speak to colleagues and answer questions. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome, and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.